So there was an issue with the live stream, so this is the second attempt at this episode, and hopefully the audio is proper. Okay. Hello everyone. I guess. Okay. The title of the episode is Intelligence is Attention Going from the Known to the Unknown. Previously at the first attempt of this episode, I was saying how the whole day, to some degree, I was thinking about this concept of intelligence. And I was wondering what is the simplest way to explain this idea, to talk about it. And so I came up with this statement, again, intelligence is attention going from the known to the unknown, and I'm going to attempt to explain, at least so far, on this planet, my perception of what is intelligent, because we consider ourselves as intelligent creatures. We consider different types of intelligence, and our survival and the survival of our species is also dependent on our intelligence and the way that intelligence goes forth. These are important points. There is something, first of all, I guess I got to go into the concept of knowledge. Knowledge is considered as a justified true belief. And what is considered a belief is something that is personally true for the person, but it could be impersonally, beyond the dimensions of their personhood, not to be true. So this is an important notion in regards to knowledge, that knowledge is a justified true belief. Now, there's two types of knowledge that in some sense, I would say intellectual circles consider. There is a priori and a posteriori. A priori, the word literally means from the earlier, from earlier, from the earlier, and you can say a posteriori means from the later. And so it's in some sense looking at knowledge, and one sense of knowledge a priori is independent of sense information, sense experience. What that means is, for example, somebody says, let's say 3 is a prime number, let's say blue is a color. Do you know? I mean, blue is a color. I mean, that has to do with sense experience. But let's say in regards to mathematics, and other arbitrary forms of observation. But when we look at a posteriori, it's as if, like in the first attempt at this episode, I said, for example, the Prime Minister of Canada is Justin Trudeau right now. So that's something that the person can go and find an empirical evidence for. It's something that is not just valid in the personal dimensions of the individual, but also in the impersonal dimension of the individual. Now, when I look at life, what I do is not, firstly, I've learned from Socrates, where he says the only true knowledge, the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing. And what Socrates means is that the situation, the existential situation the creature finds itself in, is one where there is way more unknown variables than known variables. And that is really giving me a permission to speak, because the world is so unknown till the end of time, and we can explore it, and yet we cannot put it into one simple statement, I would say, or one single equation, even though we have made this whole world into one word, and we call it, for example, universe, as if in one verse it is captured. So, if we look at the existential situation, everything was in the unknown. That means before there were creatures here, there was so much to see, yet there was nobody to see it. There was nobody to know it. So the first thing we can consider about knowledge is that it has a gravitational center, and the center of it is the self. And so when there emerged a self that could have a relationship, a conscious relationship with the world, then in some sense knowledge came into our consciousness. And people think that knowledge is something that is, I would say, created, but I would say knowledge is discovered. Its interpretation is created. As if there is so much of the world going on that is unknown, and suddenly this creature noticed something. You know, Isaac Newton noticed an apple falling, you know. And so there was a realization, the discovery of, for example, the force gravity. So what I'm trying to say is that there is this massive unknown landscape, and it seems that the existential intelligent purpose of the creature is to, in some sense, retranslate through its own eyes at first, and then through the eyes of the collective, the unknown into known variables that can be used. For example, when you look at even the concept of an invention, you know, even though an invention is something new, but in some sense it is previously created phenomena that are connected to one another, and then it leads to something. So it's as if we took a bunch of known variables and we created a new variable, a new known variable from the unknown variable. So what I'm pretty much saying is that in the subtitle I've written brains that self-activated. So when there emerged the self, the game of knowledge became important, and the game of knowledge is to make the unknown known. So our intelligence exists or is experiencing existence from known to unknown, known to unknown. Every day we wake up, it's as if again we engage the unknown and remodify our known variables. When I have wondered about my own intelligence, I noticed that ultimately there is an attention, and this attention has no qualities, but it seems it's kind of like light. Do you know what I mean? It's like it allows you to see the world, but you cannot see light. Do you know what I mean? It's as if it's moving at that which is moving at the speed of light. Our eyes are not faster than. And you know, it's not that we can't see light. I mean, it is true that on some level light moves at a very fast speed. Moves faster than sound. Yet what we see is most likely a slowed down effect. But I'm trying to say that every day I've woken up in this world so far. It has been the presence of attention from whatever it knows, finds the edge of what it knows, and then starts having a relationship with the unknown. Now, if there is so much unknown, should the species be in a specific tutelage? Should it have a specific purpose? Or that means it's like when we look at the educational system, should the educational system be teaching people, or should it in some sense be motivating or creating circumstances for exploration? something strange is happening, is that it's as if we are constantly feeding the past to the future. And we expect the future to do something new. This is why they would say isolation, or I would say not isolation, but solitude was in some sense a great opportunity. In ancient cultures, there was the shamanic figure, and the shamanic figure wasn't per se like a world leader, wasn't a tribe leader, or wasn't someone who was there in the open moving people. The shaman intentionally was distant from society. Why? So it could in some sense approach this existence with an experience that is not constantly being forged and contained by the past of society. And of course, when I'm talking about intelligence, there could be a certain percentage of the population that would be like, hey, Mr. Within, what if it's not something to articulate? What if it's something emotional? What if the purpose of intelligence is to be happy or to be enjoyed 24/7? I would say, sure, if you want to consider emotions to be more superior than the geometry of vision, or the design of existence, then that's fine. Now think as if after you've been in an emotional fulfillment of intelligence for a long time. Now wonder, it's as if I'm talking about post emotions. That means it's as if it's like been there, done that. The person experienced moments of joy. Now it's as if, okay, beyond the self, it's the collective self, and our collective self, which is 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, it is not even near experiencing joy. That means certain parts of the world, sure, they have more of a joyous experience than other parts, but you see, I'm trying to say that beyond just an instantaneous idea that intelligence is just the here and now, or intelligence is one emotion where anywhere you can be, that emotion kind of overrides the meaning of the moment. I feel that there is, in, let's say, teleology, telos, when we're wondering about the purpose of life, there is two components there. I consider an inner component and an outer component. In the inner component, it can be self-sufficient, just like the brain's self-activated. In some sense, it can realize that it is the source of its intelligence. So every human being could be like, okay, I am where the universe in my eyes is beginning, so this is the truth and this is enough, and that's fine. But I would say, in this notion, going from the Buddhic nature to the Bodhisattvic nature, that's if people on the planet, or in at least Buddhism, they were trying to attain a Buddhic nature, which means a self-enlightenment. But I would say the Bodhisattvic nature is collective enlightenment. What that means is it's like first the person is in a sort of individual, just for the sake of speech, I'm going to say this, is first in a sort of individual hell. Then they in some sense get out of that individual hell and they attain their individual heaven. Now, once you attain the individual heaven, you notice the collective hell. And once you notice the collective hell, the purpose of all the previous senses of self, I would say, becomes in some sense the collective heaven. So in caring for society, you see, guys, these talks of mine, even though I speak about myself as a mystic, as someone who's paying more attention to the experiential dimensions rather than the existential dimensions, but I will tell you that for me, a huge part of the world is that which is beyond ourself. And so if we don't care for that which is beyond ourself, we will not see anything beyond it. And most immediately, as we're stationed as biological individuals, that which is beyond ourself is our world, and it's what's happening in our world. And so intelligence has an individual, let's say, observance, but it also has a collective observance. And in this episode, when I talk about intelligence's attention going from the known to the unknown, I'm trying to see pretty much in all these episodes, believe it or not, after 2015, it's like my attention went on, okay, we have the past, we have the present, we have the future. So when somebody comes to speak about anything, or comes to wonder about things. They're either wondering about their past, they're wondering about the present, where it's all projecting from, or they're wondering about the future. The thing about the past is that it's past, but its content is accessible in our inner realms. The thing about the future is that it has not happened, and its content, most people feel, is not accessible in the inner realms, but I will tell you the future is designed from the inner realms. So when we look at the human intelligence and we realize that this intelligence has an inner and outer component, the inner component is the role of imagination. And so a lot of, I would say, yogi, spiritual and religious people, I would say they in some sense think that to go towards truth is the renunciation of imagination. But I would say, to me, it's the utility. It's how you use your imagination, not that you just pushed it aside and you found heaven in an instant. There's more. It's as if, think of it as if you're already in heaven, then what? You know what I mean? So it's as if like the mind can perceive beyond its own individual completion. So when it comes to the inner dimensions of the human being, we're wondering about the role of imagination, like what is its role in the collective advancement. And in the outer, it is pretty much reality is where things are being advanced. So when we think about the past, all we have access to is an alphabet or a dictionary of ideology. That's the value of the past. That means all our ancestors, they lived for some things, they lived for some sort of idea or a vision, and the result of their vision is kind of like our modern day armor or the weapons, the sword and shield like medieval times we carry. So if we were to wonder, about the future, and how attention will move from the known to the unknown, it means in some sense, how will people's inner eyes change? How will the person's inner life take place or move and advance? And how would the outer life, the outer eyes, perceive and advance? When I look in the outer realms, the unknown is that which is not in light, and for the inner realms I would say that which is not in sound. It's as if the absence of phenomenology, so space is what the species should be looking for. We have been too occupied by what's in the space, not wondering about the nature of space. Right now my eyes are open. I see the buildings in front of me from my balcony. And right now I've closed my eyes. And I do see those buildings, but I also see that the image I had when my eyes were open and now I've closed is slowly dissolving back into the pitch black room. Behind our eyes, it's evocational. And what that means is we use content from the outer realms forge an inner realm. When I think about 8 billion intelligent human beings and what will happen to their bodies either will stay natural or will go towards a technological position, or in some sense we will transcend embodiment. These are the three options. Either we stay natural or we infuse with the unnatural, or we go beyond the game of nature. When I look at the mind is very strange, and this is something I've never said, but I would say the mind, it's as if it's waiting. I think this is a great sentence, that everybody's intelligence is waiting. But what is it waiting for? I would say, when I close my eyes and I visualize things, it's strange because it's not like my body is moving. My body is still in the outer realms, but in the inner realms, phenomena happens. So in the inner realms, we experience eventhood prior to body's movement. So behind our eyes, we have an ability to move regardless of if our body is moving or not. It's important that the body is alive, but but I'm saying it's like you can close your eyes and attention can be, call it thought construct. I just simplified and I say inner realms and inner reality, the inner life of the person. In the outer realms, we have to journey towards the unknown. So in front of our eyes, I would say the purpose of intelligence is a journey. So if we can create smoother journeys, and we have this mentality that we are 8 billion travelers due to our mortality, that we are 8 billion travelers, in a realm that is infinitely vast, or appears to be infinitely vast. So I will say, in front of your eyes, the aim of intelligence is exploration, and we require to explore everything. Everything. That means regardless of how the past convinces you, if the spirit of exploration leaves you, then you have been caught in an image. You see, it's so easy for me to just accept life as an image. If I wanted to, I'd be like, yeah, this is it. It's so easy. It's the lazy man's approach. It's as if life is nothing. Yeah, that's it. Or life is just one truth. That's it. There's more. There's definitely more. And there's stages to it, and there's levels to it, and there's a multidimensionality at work that we fear. And because we fear the multidimensionality, pretty much people are running towards emptiness, or they're running towards oneness. What else can a creature do? What else can a temporary individual in a vast, infinite landscape do? Right? If it has a fear of journeying through the multidimensional. From a mystical sense, I will say the eyes of man is the past, the eyes of mankind is the future. And those who care for the eyes of mankind, these Mr. Within talks are for you. But if you care for only the eyes of the self, you see, there has been too many mystics, too many yogis who have been like, forget the world, go into yourself and discover the true nature that way. That means I notice the yogic mindset, and the yogic mindset, I would say, Sri Ramana Maharshi has a very incredible quote. He says, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. That means discover the nature of your own eyes, get to the, I don't want to say get to the bottom of your to your mind source. But I would say there's some people here that haven't understood yet that there's a field of intelligence at work. And the moment you realize you're part of that field, you're no longer just fascinated by oneness or a supreme unity. It's like there's way more to do. Do you know how many types of children are going to be born in the future, and they're not all going to just be like sitting in caves meditating? The future is an activity. and this activity can be made conscious. So I would say those people who have been listening to these Mr. Within talks, the yogis stand in one corner. They have, in some sense, they're trying to reverse engineer into the past. I would say the advanced communicators, those interested in these Mr. Within talks, it's as if there's a work to be done. I don't want to say there's an agenda, but it's like when you look at the outer realms, things are happening. They're going forth, whether you make a decision or not, whether the person's like, I like it, I dislike it. You think the world is like, buddy, you're late. So in the middle of our dislikes and likes, we are in some sense missing out. Now, when we wonder about, again, intelligence and how it progresses into the future, in the outer realms, as I said earlier, that it's a journey, it means it's activity oriented, and new activities surpass, I would say they are the most enlightened in the outer realms, right? So those who in some sense are doing new things, or appears to them new, or compared to who they were yesterday, they live a day and something new is seen. You know, I remember the first sentence I wrote that I declared to myself I'm a writer, and I taped it on the wall, like this printer paper on the wall, was that I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. And I realized that that's what normality is. That is what the fear of the future is, that we want it to look the same, but will it be the same? Maybe in our inner realms it can be. Maybe a person lives like 10 years of life and they still think who they are, who they were, like, I don't know, like 10 years ago. But I will say in the inner realms, it is just momentary projection of meaning. In the outer realms, our bodies change, everything changes. And the whole point of life is not that we don't change, or we think that truth is something we hold on to and never changes. I would say it's that we consciously change, because in the history of humanity, it has been unconscious change. The world has been changing us, and now we can change the world. That means prior to consciousness of self, how could we have changed the world? There was no world to be considered. It was just a biological body roaming the world, the environment. You know, the ecosystem was our imagination. Now our imagination is separated from the ecosystem, and it's like another dimension of function over nature's function. So in the outer realms, the intelligent path is journeying through novelty and exploring. We have to build a civilization that is inspiring the exploration mindset. You know, based on low standards of living, a person cannot. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like most human beings are still trying to balance their physiological survival, do you know? But it's as if, like, imagine you're a child in a country where there's incredible poverty, you haven't had a chance to even touch a book, you have been, let's say, running for your life, you know, and let's say somehow after you get through that poverty, you come to the modern world, and when you come to the modern world, then it's like a domain of psychological exploration. But here's the strange thing in our modern world, that we have in some sense kept the how would I say it? It's as if people, how can I say this without offending the universe? We call it modernity, but it's pretty much the past being kept. Believe it or not, our inner realms should be advancing way more quicker than our outer realms, but it's the opposite. We have advanced technology, but we don't have moral users of the technology. You know, we have created a very sophisticated, let's say when you look at the tech sector, sophisticated, very like a lot of sophisticated technologies, but how we're going to use those technologies, still there's the fear of somebody pressing a nuclear button. You see what I mean? So we have to care as a species for the journey from the unknown, from the known to the unknown in the outer realms and in the inner realms. And in the inner realms, it is scary to go into the unknown because it may suggest that you have to forget who you are now to realize who you can be, as Lao Tzu suggested. I envisioned in my inner realms a future where there is an honor point system. Back in the day, they had honor. Now you can say we are dishonorable people. Everybody everybody's included. There may be somebody who's a samurai. It's like, I got honor, Mr.Within. Who you talking about this on? But I'll tell you, no. The collective is dishonorable. Why? Because we are aiming for freedom, but we're not realizing that if we seek personal freedom, we in some sense cannot adjust the outer realm. It's as if 8 billion individuals, does it make sense if they work together, or does it make sense every single one of them does their own thing? And we have lived through the phase of everyone doing their own thing and there not being an additional narrative and new ethos, that it's as if when you wake up in the day you feel not just proud of the civilization you're in, but it's as if every day it's advancing. And how I can tell we're not on that path? Because when you turn on the news, what is more interesting, what is being shared is not advancement, it's the opposite. It's the failures of mankind. And the entertainment industry has made failure in some sense the content to show, but I will say that is the biggest ignorance. There should be TV channels where you turn on and it's like endless advancement, it's like all the advancements happening on the earth are being shown. And so imagine in the future, let's say, I don't know if this is going to be during the phase of cyberspace, and there's a evolutionary chart in us going into cyberspace. So think of it as if there's an evolutionary chart where it shows the primitive ape kind of standing up in the chart towards becoming the modern Homo sapien. I would say in the evolutionary chart, the continuation of that evolutionary chart, there is a potential destiny to the human species that we're actually becoming machines. So it could be that in the future, it's like after an old person's going to get tired of being in a biological body, and it's like, okay, I'm pretty old, let me go experience a robotic body. Let's, for example, the transference of some sort of conscious intelligence. So during that phase, it's like technology is becoming closer and closer, and the human being is becoming more intimate with technology. A phase of that will require our eyes. And so that means it's as if people, there's a lot of media out there that kind of depicts this, but in some sense, pretty much you either have goggles or implants in your eyes or your brain or whatnot, in which it allows you to see layers of cyber information over the outer realms. So imagine there's an honor point system. The honor point system would in some sense replace the concept of work. The way we see work taking place now in 2021. The way it would replace it is that, first of all, there is no, how would I say it? It's as if everything the person does, if they do, or let me just draw the picture a bit bigger actually. In the future, in this honor point system for the advanced civilization, and let's say an advanced civilization that is not just technologically blind, that is naturally free as well. It has preserved its relationship with nature rather than avoiding it. But let's say in an advanced civilization, every person that is alive, that is functioning in societies all around the world, if they do an act of kindness, there will be honor points added. Do you see? If there is, in some sense, let's say they do something wrong, there is criminal points added, or something of the sort. I don't know what to call it. Dishonor points. So in that honor point system, Do you see? It would be as if the ideals of exploration, the ideals of civility, which separates us from being an animal. Anybody who is violent in 2021, like we're right now in the world, anybody who's being violent, it's as if you are descending. You're going back into the cave where, the animal was hiding in. You see, they say the reptilian brain, so different parts of the brain developed over time. And it took millions of years. For the reptilian brain, they suggest that evolutionary-wise, it's fight or flight. What does that mean? That means there was a saber-tooth, there was some sort of tiger behind the bush, and the person would notice a sort of movement, a sort of unknown movement, and the person had the option of engaging it or running away, We either get afraid and crawl towards our past, or we uphold some sort of experiential courage to see how the moment will go forth and to experience it. And I would say different human beings have different abilities when it comes to this. Those beings that are braver than the rest, and it could be in different dimensions. Somebody could be very brave in the inner realms, but could be, for example, cowardly in the outer realms. Somebody could be brave in the outer realms, but very cowardly when it comes to the inner realms. It's as if we should not have a fear to use our bodies, and we should not have a fear to use our minds. And if we have fear, the past has become victorious. That means no new dimension of perception is activated. For example, somebody who's afraid of something, what do? They avoid it. So think of as if all the things a person fears in their life, they're avoiding all the dimensions, and intelligence is really everywhere. Because if a person takes things as separate, then there is fear. But if you look at this world and see an interconnectivity in regards to the design and geometry of any phenomena, In my youth, for example, I had a fear of speech. I would say I was kind of locked, encaged in my own shyness, caged by my shyness, who I really was. And then to a point where I would freeze when I would give PowerPoint presentations, But then I realized, wait a minute, rock in the middle of nowhere, creatures have emerged. Every creature has a different, unique DNA. Why shouldn't the person have a sort of strength in speech? So when something becomes important, like let's say when you notice an emergency, there is an instant activation of intelligence to act, right? And the issue is that we have not made our futures important enough for us to, in some sense, move beyond our fears and do something about it. This honor point system will motivate the species regardless of its egoic construct, and Alan Watts explains the ego in a very interesting way. He says that your ego is the idea of self you have. So right now, if I feel like I'm somebody giving a talk, like I have the ego of somebody giving a talk, it's like moments where I'm sleeping, in deep sleep, where there is no ego, but it's like that moment before I fall asleep, I'm like, look at my ego of, somebody sleeping, sleepy ego. By the way, guys, the chat section is open for anybody to think of the chat section as a wall, and anybody could write anything on that wall. But anyways, back to the idea of intelligence. So the intelligence in our outer realms, journeying from the known to the unknown, means that we require to create a civilization that is more inspired and fascinated by what it doesn't know than by what it knows. When you are fascinated, when you enjoy, let's say you get pleasure from knowing something, You know, let's say somebody knows 2 plus 2 equals 4, and every time they say 2 plus 2 equals 4, they're like, yeah, you know, they're enjoying it. You know, but imagine 2 plus 3 equals 5, people haven't come to that conclusion yet. You know, and so the person who stops the 2 plus 2 equals 4 and wonders about 2 plus 3 equals what, you know. The unknown is the greatest calling of one's life, and whether people disagree or agree with me, I know that every mortal creature is destined for the unknown. You know, I remember seeing it in this show where there was this one person who said everybody has one equal destiny. And the other person was like, what do you mean? And the person's like, everybody dies. That means death is common. It's one thing birth and death is something that we all have in common. It doesn't matter what sort of personality emerged during that time, during the dash between the birth and the death of the person, you know. The dash on the gravestone, regardless of what happened, it was as if, you know, a sort of commonality of emergence and a commonality of that we will return back to the unknown. So we have taken a vacation from a gigantic unknown, I would say, intelligence, and we have in some sense come into a sort of known platform of intelligence. In the outer realms, I would say, and this would, you can say this as a model that can apply for the outer realms, for what's happening in front of your eyes and also for what's happening behind your eyes. I say in one of the books I wrote called The Great Work, it's an odd book. I would say that in it I talked about bare nature being like a circle, and inside the circle there is a triangle. I perceived it as an inverted triangle, and there is the self, there is the other, and then there's the world. 3 positions that are important to acknowledge. That means in front of your eyes, what are people doing? They're paying attention to themselves, they're paying attention to others, and they're paying attention to the stage where all of this is happening in the world. So anybody who wants to, in the outer realms, update, or in, I shouldn't say update, but in some sense, the explorations of intelligence can be of the self, so you can wonder about the unknown, the known self, and the unknown self. You can wonder about the known other, how we know other people, other beings, and the in some sense, the unknown other, for example, if there were interdimensional beings. And then there would be, in some sense, the known world, and then the unknown world. The known world is, you know, what our eyes permit, the certain range of perception that is allowed through the electromagnetic spectrum. And the unknown world is all the unobservable phenomena that potentially is happening. You know, one of the biggest fallacies of our species could be the concept emptiness. There could be this notion that there is no such thing as emptiness. That emptiness there may be for the persona, but in some sense everything has a sort of force, and this force continues. It's as if we say energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it transforms. You know, as if there's different types of energy, but ultimately energy is like one. You know, that means the energy that is being me, and in the yogic mindset there was the notion of chakras. You know, it's like the energy that is being me, and the energy that is being the world, and the energy that is being others. It's the same energy, and energy again that cannot be created or destroyed. The ultimate truth is really energy. We're all energetic beings. It's like energy is being people. So outer realms, self, other world, I would say in the inner realms, there is self, other world, but the sense of others. So in the outer realms, in front of our eyes, our sense of self, our physical self, and our sense of the sense of others, like other people's physical self, it's a projection of the world. But behind your eyes, the world and others is a projection of the self. So this would suggest that the self is a world. The self, that in some sense, the attention behind our eyes that is capturing ourself and others, that is a dimension. That is a world of its own, a projective source. And I would say in front of our eyes, the physical world is the projection. It's as if it's as if Alan Watts had this incredible saying. I mean, he was relaying a Zen koan, but he's like, who were you? Who would you be if your parents had never been born? That's a Zen koan. So behind our eyes, the journey of how a self projects others from known variables towards the unknown variables, and how the self projects worlds. So behind, anybody who closes their eyes, pretty much, I think this is what's happening to a lot of the inner workings of the brains of people, is that they're fathoming others and they're fathoming the world. And in contrast, that means when you look at others and look at the world, then you get a notion of yourself. So behind our eyes, I would say, the nature of its design is that others and the world are prioritized. In front of our eyes, I would say, the self and others are prioritized. And so if we can make this a full circle behind our eyes and in front of our eyes, that means we have people all around the world suddenly being like, okay, this idea of self, other world in the inner realms and the outer realms makes sense. So what do I do about it? As if every person wonders about their relationship with themselves, with their physical body, relationship with other physical bodies, and their relationship with the physical world. This is really what the educational system should be, in some sense, exploring. And behind our eyes, it is your relationship with yourself, with the world, with the inner world and inner others. So that means we shouldn't avoid people. That means when you see people, for example, secular, or let me say a militant atheist goes to a, let's say, poor religious person, who doesn't have any... Let's say a militant atheist looks at the theist, he's like, buddy, you're having a relationship with the divine? Buddy, you're having a relationship with God? Get out of here, And then the militant theist looks at the atheist, buddy, you're having a relationship with the physical world, with a, empty self. It's like, get out of here, But it's all exploration. That is the ultimate view. I have been giving these talks for 7 years. I have been scoping literally like a drone, moving in my inner realms, wondering about how ideas are being people and how ideas are being the world and how ideas are even being myself, And all of it comes down to exploration, simply because it all shuts down. It's as if when we sleep, it's like the computer shuts down, and then when we wake up, the computer restarts. So, from this perspective, we study the relationships people have when their eyes are closed with other archetypes other than themselves, with the other dimension, and with the world. And I would say behind your eyes, you can instantly navigate. You can perceive so many different worlds. You can feel like you have a spirit guides. You can feel like you're, imagine like Willy Wonka's spirit guide was like a giant gingerbread man or something. You know what I mean? Like the mind can project. It's as if the mind can project various relationships instantly. So behind our eyes, we actually experience consciously change. That means, like, right now I'm staring at this coffee cup in front of me. In my inner realms, I can see myself already holding the coffee cup, but my hand is holding a pen right now instead of the coffee cup. So my mind has created a relationship of myself with the world, because the coffee cup is not another person, I would say. So in some sense, the inner realms animates quicker than the outer realms. So it could mean that if we are to build a proper educational system for an advanced civilization, this educational system will be divided into inner studies and outer studies. And when it comes to inner studies, the study of numenology, in the outer realms we study phenomenology. In the study of numenology, we have this giant database of all the different ways, as if behind our eyes, think of it this way, it's as if everybody's body is like, everybody's DNA is like a unique instrument, and this instrument, when it plays, it first hears the music in the inner realms, and if it cares for the outer realm enough, it shares, right? Because a person can become so content with their mind that they could stop being embodied. I lived some years as a mind moving more than a body, guys, And of course, I would say in 2021, we have not built a proper outer realm that truly assists the advanced communicators of the realm. It's as if people are physically trying to satisfy their wonder for the unknown. But what about non-physical approaches? So my attention has come to the branch of the chat section, has flown to the branch of the chat section. Yusuf says, what you're looking for is already looking through your eyes. Beyond time, there is only one being. Justin says greetings, Justin, I gotta admit, you sound like an alien. Dawn says, what's the difference between running away from fear and staying away as a protector? I would say staying as a protector. I would say, it depends. What are you protecting? I would say somebody who runs away is protecting themselves. Somebody who stays, they're protecting something more than themselves. Because the easiest protection is relocation. A person is in a dangerous, let's say they're standing beside like a volcano, what do? They get out of there. But imagine you're in a country that needs development. Or you're a soldier back in the day in a battlefield. Imagine you're like, I use this metaphor where it's like, imagine the story, like you imagine you're a baker or you're an artist, and back in medieval times you're inside like this kingdom, and suddenly you hear the bells ring at midnight, and suddenly you see it's like the neighboring kingdom has attacked your kingdom, right? So the person may like the baker may choose to run away, or the bakers who could be like, I'm not baking bread today, and run into the battlefield. So I would say if you care and have experienced something more than yourself, you in some sense care for its continuity. This is really what love is. Love is like as if you care for something either more or equivalent to yourself, so you cannot see it diminish. For example, siblings are like this, or comrades in the battlefield are like this, where they care for each other because they're in the same boat. But those who jump off from the boat, they have a unique karma. really something huge about intelligence is that it can be activated. So think of it as if there is no such thing as stupid and smart people. There has never been such a thing as stupid and smart people. There has just been those who have been conscious of the activities of their worlds more in the outer realms than the inner realms, or more in the inner realms than the outer realms. We think freedom and equality is the greatest ideals in the outer realms, but I would say exploration goes beyond it. If our freedom doesn't update us, what kind of freedom is that? You know, if our equality destroys us, what kind of freedom is that? You know, let's say there comes this equality that every person in the world needs to have a weapon. I mean, even young children, we gotta be equal. There has to be equality. You know, if a grown man has a weapon, a child has to have a weapon. Do you see what I mean? Like, equality can be dangerous. But at the same time, the absence of equality in certain domains can also be dangerous too, you know? So I'm not saying that equality is wrong, but it's like there's different circumstances, conditions in the world, and we act accordingly, rather than just having a past image that this is what freedom means, this is what equality means, you know, and avoid how the future is changing. During the 6th century, when, for example, there was a religious revelation, that religious revelation, I would say, was freedom for some people. Imagine you were like a goat herder, a shepherd or something. You were someone who was just living in the village. You're like, what's the point of this whole existence, you know? And then there came, for example, a telos, that it's as if, for example, in the religious mentality in the 6th century, it was as if like served God, tried to go to heaven. And so people who were in some sense like they were like, okay, enough with just sitting in my village, you know, I'm gonna go looking for the beyond. But if we are insincere, that means if back in the day in the 6th century the religious revelation was the new and people at the time engaged the new, if right now we're acting like people in the past, it doesn't make sense. We are being insincere with the revelations of the future. And this is a challenge because the species is enchanted into a linguistic simulation. That means people are contained in stories. And you tell someone a good story and they can't discriminate that they're not the language, their life is going to be shackled, you know? And if somebody, for example, their life is shackled in language and you're like, hey buddy, you're not the words you've been believing this whole time. You know, you're more than just your attention being on a single phenomenon or noumenon. Then the person finds freedom, you know? Believe it or not, there's moments where I doubt myself. Can you believe it? There's moments where I doubt myself and I can totally notice it's as if my intelligence is telling me a weak and inefficient story. It's as if, let's say I was incapable in the past in doing something, I come to do it now, and the brain's like, okay, I either have to create a new story in the moment, which takes more energy and more effort, or I just compare this to the past and stay as the past. That's what I've been trying to do, because believe it or not, the past is so easy to just say like, yeah, the past was like this, or that's what something means. It's like, no. You know, the biggest clue that we're still enchanted by language, not realizing that there's a creative space of exploration beyond it, is simply that the dictionary has not updated. In some sense, the words in the dictionary, there, it's like, I mean, of course, there's way more words, but I'm saying it's not that fast. It's as if the alphabet, for example, in the English language, after the letter Z was stopped, there wasn't new letters, there wasn't a new emergence of the system, re-emergence of the system. Guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. I'm gonna get some coffee. Okay. So, this whole idea of the going from the known to the unknown and the journey of attention in the inner realms and the outer realms, I feel it's either a nullification or an infinite acceptance. That means the species, I feel, in order to really be able to endure in the future, has to accept infinite progression, infinite advancement. And the balance of how much should you dedicate your life to only your eyes, and how much you should dedicate your life to the eyes of others, and how much you should dedicate your life to the eyes of the world. This balance is unknown. That means there's moments where I feel as if the world deserves better. And then there's a time, from the idea of the world deserving better, it's as if others deserve better, and then you realize, oh my God, I am in this world too, with the others. And then the person wonders, I deserve better. And you know what's fascinating? I remember reading this quote about destiny. And the quote about destiny was saying something as if people think destiny is about chance, but it's actually about choice. So the choices we make suggest the unknown dimensions we access. I'm looking back at my life and I'm thinking, like, if I had decided to just be a soccer player, in my youth I wanted to be a soccer player, so I wondered if I had been a soccer player right now, imagine I was part of a football team, had lived that life, I had been a non-smoker, just exercising all day, let's say, imagine like I was a next level soccer player making a ridiculous living, It's as if I would never wonder beyond the comfort and contentment of that individual life. So sometimes in life, it could be that suffering wakes us up from the dimensions that we have accepted. And you know what's fascinating, as I brought the concept of destiny, it's as if every child that has been born and will be born, it's as if it's going to go in the world and it's not going to just engage a physical landscape, it's going to engage an ideological landscape. If the society welcomes the child is going to accept the past and be like, yay, I'm winning in this game of life, And if the child feels rejected from society, you see, it's like there's 8 billion people. There is no way 8 billion people are all integrated into society. No way. So we're living, as a majority of the world's population is living outside of the general stories that the world accepts. One thing that is in common is, I would say, this is my common denominator statement, where I say it in every talk, and it honestly this is what I use to keep myself humble, and at the same time, if there's conflict in the outer realms or in the inner realms, whatever it is, let's say in the outer realms, in the inner realms it's a bit different, but in the outer realms I come back to this notion that, okay, if somebody is cruel to me, I'm on a rock in the middle of nowhere and so are they. Do you know, if I am cruel to myself, okay, I'm just a creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere. This is the best that I could do. You know, and if sometimes when I look at the world and I'm like, holy shit, is the world going to destroy itself? At some point I'm like, okay, it's a rock in the middle of nowhere. There's creatures on it and people. This is the best that the civilization could do. Do you know? And of course, you know, because we're right now in language, this is why it's the era of the advanced communicators, I declared after 2020. Why? Because the advanced communicators are slowly people who are waking up from language, and the moment you realize you're not the language, you are the observance of it as an instantaneous attention, you will have an incredible ability with navigation through design. So there is on the phase of, I would say, the pure, the true divinity of our species, a geometrical phase. And in that geometrical phase, it starts off with language shifts, and eventually as the language shifts, the identity, new identities emerge. And believe it or not, you know, right now I was like boiling hot water for my coffee. It's honestly a perfect metaphor. You know, that it's as if it's like something is at a certain temperature, but as you raise its temperature, you know, these bubbles appear at the bottom of the kettle and they rise to the top, you know, and it's as if the room temperature of the civilization, the global civilization, is just like how language has kept it. But as the temperature increases, as the particles begin moving, as eyes open beyond words in the recognition of an unknown world, that means it's like we accepted the world in a known way too soon. It is more unknown than one man can even speak of. You know, sometimes when I give these talks, you know, I feel like there may be people who feel I'm speaking about truth, but I will tell you, I am pointing to truth. I am pointing to it. You know, there's this Cherokee saying that says, when I point to the stars, don't stare at my fingertip. That means the idea is not of an individual display, but in some sense cultivating a collective momentum. You know, something I personally feel is a lot of people, I don't know, I mean, we are just voices in the void on some level. But the content that these voices have or demonstrate or share, I would say it is in some sense the suggestion that the world was never empty. There is something here, but it is not here. But it is here to itself, you can say. There is a urge, I would say there is a desire for human beings to have stability. We have brought forth this concept of balance, and it is true, I would say, you do need a balance between heaven and earth. You do need a balance between your inner life and outer life, but the explorer has experienced the balance and is wondering about it, the beyond. You know, it's as if somebody jumping, then somebody bungee jumping, then somebody skydiving, then the person, you know, becoming an astronaut, you know. Whether in one lifetime or 4 lifetimes. Now, if I could go to the inner realms, the outer realms pretty much all concluded as 8 billion human beings. They require to understand that they're journeying together, and in order to enhance the life of all of us, we have to see beyond our personal dimensions. This doesn't mean sacrifice your personal dimension. This doesn't mean sacrifice your identity for this truth that you think is like the ultimate. I would say it's more like learning to walk with your species, or walk with the intelligence that is found on this rock in this middle of nowhere. You know, because everything after the self-emerged is a relationship. You know, it's like, it's not that right now talking is its own thing. We say like a person is talking. So the personality is, everything's connecting to the personality. Now, if somebody in the outer realms studies intelligence and is like, okay, it's coming from the world. I was born into this world. Others were born into this world. And whether we conceive through the Big Bang Theory, where it's like from a pool of potential energy, suddenly a universe sparked and then cooled down. Or even from the religious narrative, where as if God commanded the universe into existence. Either way, the self is crucial. In the outer realms, we live for the world in front of our eyes. Behind our eyes, we live for the self, and now that self is something that I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I have experienced movement in my mind. I dedicated an episode to this, many episodes to this, but I would say I have experienced states where I am watching my being, and the doership is just potential. Think of it this way, that we think potential energy is becoming kinetic energy. There is some truth to that in the outer realms, but behind your eyes, the potentials are standing, and your decision to act upon them also creates another dimension of them standing in your mind. So think of it as if there is a post-action based self, and then there is a pre-action based self, and then there's a post-action based self. The post-action based self usually has more shape, more color. The pre-action based self is just standing as the still watcher. So in some sense, it's as if it is true, we have biological bodies, but it is my through my own intuition, I have come to the realization that our minds cannot die, that the watcher within cannot go anywhere. It is. Now, having a relationship with the self that is projecting the world and other means that there is a freedom to see how to, in some sense, create worlds behind your eyes, and there's a freedom to create others, to create how others come across. And believe it or not, the most important thing about that is how you are keeping yourself in the moment. You know, we think that in some sense it's a creation of self. I would say it's a keeping of yourself. You're holding the moment. And how you hold it based on the energy that is there to work with, it animates. If you in some sense hold it and don't move, that means this is called single pointed attention, or you can say concentration, deep concentration. Deep concentration is a bit different than the sort of meditation that attains a sort of bliss, because the oneness that is cultivated means that it's like everything is being in one moment, so it's like the single pointedness is on the world. But if a person has a single pointedness on others, and I shouldn't say others, but something that is other. So right now, like there's the corner of my balcony I'm looking at, and if I keep looking at that, based on where my attention is, the meaning, the context of meaning slowly adjusts to that. Now, if you close your eyes and visualize an apple, let's say right now we'll do an exercise. Everybody who's listening to me, close your eyes and visualize like a blue apple. Just a blue apple hovering in the air in front of you, but keep your eyes closed and visualize it. Now, when you did this visualization, I'm going to assume people did it in an instant. Now, your eyes, let's say your eyes are closed, and even right now I'm visualizing that blue apple kind of floating in the air in front of me. That attention to that apple is independent of an attention to a shaped self. So it's first person point of view. So the first person point of view nature, I mean, think about it. It's like our bodies are first person point of view. Our eyes are not like above our head. They are like on our face. So this first person point of view, we say what is looking out of our eyes, we come to the inner self. Now, if you wonder about what is looking when your eyes are closed at whatever it's seeing in that space where memory and visualization are in the same room happening, your subtler planes of abstraction and intelligence. The witness of that cannot be allocated or cannot be sourced back into a thought. So in front of your eyes, you're like, who's looking at the world? We say the thought of self. Behind your eyes, when your eyes are closed and you're looking at an image or whatever content there is in your abstraction, that cannot be a self. So behind our eyes, there is a selfless intelligence where the most secular way I can explain it is it's a field of intelligence. Consciousness, what we call consciousness, is like one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is collective awareness, or a field of awareness. Now, having a relationship with this field of awareness means having a relationship with an intelligence that is not a self, not a world, and not an other. That means it's not ideological. So what does that mean? That means it becomes pure potential. So the purpose of the inner life, when I say exploration, that exploration leads into a recognition of a source field. So behind your eyes, study how you're being human, and in front of your eyes, study how you're a human being. And I feel every person in any moment, regardless of what idea, what emotion, what sort of combination of identification and endurance in that identification they have, every person honestly knows that there is an unknown, that there is the watcher behind, through our eyes, is unknown. So you know what it is? It's kind of like a bell curve going from the unknown to the known, and you draw a line in the middle of that bell curve, and from one side it is like the inner realms, from an unknown coming to the known variable of the ideological self, and then from the unknown of the outer realms coming to the known outer, the body. So pretty much we are a shape that is being aware it's a shape, shapelessly. And there is no language for this. So the species has to have a maturity to recognize that there is dimensions of intelligence that cannot be contained. They are more like how would I say, they're more like just movement, a sort of dynamism. They're like verbs. It's like behind our eyes, life is a verb. In front of our eyes, it's a noun. As a manner of speech. And what we call knowing is actually a journey. That means the unknown doesn't go away. It's just the knowledge seems to be expanding, but it has to do with the energy levels. If the person is tired, it's as if it's easier for the world to be meaningless. It's as if the inner realms don't have the dedication to figure out the outer realms. But if a person realizes that the body requires energy, like you gotta eat food, you gotta sleep and all that, but the mind, that viewer within you, or inner realm activity, I would say there is an unconditional nature to it. There has been days, I would say honestly, in giving these talks, I have been extremely tired, but I just have had the intent. I've been like, okay, I'm going to sit down and give a talk. And when I sit down, the inner realm starts moving, and when the inner realm starts moving, it's as if I have a single pointed attention in watching. In some sense, I've called it the cinematic inner experience. Like I can see, like all these ideas I'm sharing, they're like film snippets to some degree. And every idea also can branch out in regards to past memories or in regards to future abstraction. So pretty much I'm saying right now, 2021, we are like more than 50% a noun and less than 50% a verb. I would say in the future we will become more than 50% a verb and in some sense less than 50% a noun. So what I mean by that is that the era of the individual self, I would give it on some level, I feel in 120 years, we're going to have cyberspace collective minds, like, very properly, like, beyond its pioneered stage. Beyond the pioneered stage we can fathom. But in 3,600 years, we go beyond the language threshold, an advancement beyond the language threshold, and which means that we return to energy. That means it's as if we think our life is from our birth to our death, but this whole life is an energy that is aware of itself. But when we realize that the energy that is aware of itself is independent of the embodiment of the forms, so it's as if everybody is eternally energy aware of itself, but temporarily shaped format that will, in some sense, the iceberg in the ocean will melt. So, for tonight, this is how far I can speak about this. I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel about intelligence, so the listeners can also hear what people in the past have said about intelligence. And I would say something I think I forgot to mention. Immanuel Kant, he talks about a synthetic a priori, and what he means is that prior, like, let's say we have the concept of 5 is a prime number, he's saying in some sense there's presuppositions, unknown presuppositions before even that statement can happen. What that means is logic is like walking on thin ice. In the outer realms it's accurate, but in the inner realms it's like walking on thin ice. And when I say logic is like walking in thin ice, that means the consecutive nature, the going from A to B to C to D. In the inner realms, it could suddenly be A, B, C, D at once. Or even a more mysterious primal experiential source at work. So right now in 2021, we have to some degree mastered individual physical living, but we have not mastered collective non-physical being. Alright, now into the quote tunnel of intelligence. F. Scott Fitzgerald, he says the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Plutarch says the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. Arthur Schopenhauer says, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Roy H. Williams says a smart man makes a mistake, learns from it and never makes that mistake again, but a wise man finds a smart man and learns from him how to avoid the mistake altogether. Excuse me. Stephen Hawking says intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And I would say part of the ability, just as a comment on this quote, part of the ability to adapt to change means to be able to engage the unknown. Honestly, that's the demonstration of skill and ability. For example, when Usain Bolt broke the record of like sprinting. It was as if, in some sense, he found a way to adapt to a change, which is in some sense had been unknown to the species before. George S. Patton says if everyone is thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking. Henry Ford says failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. James Madison says knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and the people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. And knowledge, I would say, aside from just justified true belief, it's just just anywhere you are, wondering about what's going on, and wondering about what's going on truly beyond the personal, beyond your own past, believe it or not. Ray Bradbury says we listened to our intellect. We'd never have a love affair. We'd never have a friendship. We'd never go into business because we'd be cynical. Well, that's nonsense. You've got to jump off cliffs all the time and build your wings on the way down. Ernest Hemingway says an intelligent man is sometimes forced to be drunk to spend time with his fools. Excuse me. Steve Wozniak says wherever smart people work, doors are unlocked. And think about how many doors of the future we require to unlock together as a species. Stephen Hawking says, I believe alien life is quite common in the universe, although intelligent life is less so. Some say it has yet to appear on planet Earth. Aristotle says there is no great genius without some touch of madness. Socrates says, I know that I am intelligent because I know that I know nothing. Blaise Pascal says, small minds are concerned with the extraordinary, great minds with the ordinary. And I will tell you, in any observation, if you have single-pointed attention, it's not like a person having concentration understands something. There's no such thing as single understanding. Understanding is like seeing angles to something, and the more you are zoomed in, more you're concentrated on a single point, the more dimensions to that point to see. You know, it's as if a person looks at a coffee cup, then they think about, all right, I've been holding this coffee cup with my left hand. What if I hold it with my right hand? So a person looks at civilization and wonders, okay, I've been looking at civilization in one way. How about the other way? And there's so many other ways. Lena Horne says, always be smarter than the people who hire you. Augustus Hare says, the intellect of the wise is like glass. It admits the light of heaven and reflects it. That's an incredible statement. The transparency means the awareness of the unknown. George Orwell says there are some ideas so wrong that only a very intelligent person could believe in them. Susan Sontag says intelligence is really a kind of taste in ideas. Victor Hugo says intelligence is the wife, imagination is the mistress, memory is the servant. Guess that you're left with being the present in that case. Oscar Wilde says to expect the unexpected shows a thoroughly modern intellect. Albert Camus says an intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. Henry Ford says thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. E.B. White says genius is more often found in a cracked pot than in a whole one. Captain Beefheart, oh my god. He says, when I see a dolphin, I know it's just as smart as I am. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, common sense is genius dressed in its working clothes. Carl Jung says, often the hands will solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with in vain. Thomas Wentworth Higginson says, when a thought takes one's breath away, a grammar lesson seems an impertinence. Scott Adams says that if there are no stupid questions, then what kind of questions do stupid people ask? Do they get smart just in time to ask questions? You see, guys, I would say, think of it this way. Again, I would say this thing. This classification, this branding, it's like, what are we, cows? We're branding people stupid and smart. You know, it's believe it or not, it's the will and the ability to be driven. So those people who have an effort, if you keep walking a certain direction, you will see things that you hadn't seen before. That is the nature of exploration. Explorers in the outer realms, they would in some sense just walk to lands that people had never cared to walk that far. Now in the inner realms, behind our eyes, we require to walk in ways that people have not cared so far. Do you see, rather than to become content, rather than to nullify or just unify and to stop the search, it is very easy for one to have an emotional truth. But the thing is that that emotion doesn't stay, it comes and goes. That's the nature of reality. We're working with a changing world. That means in a changing world, who is there to be smart or stupid? It's changing all the time. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe says, all intelligent thoughts have already been thought. What is necessary is only try to think them again. It's another way of saying that we have observed the realm. Now, as we wonder about it again, that observance deepens. James Joyce says, a man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are volitional and are the portals of discovery. Ed Parker says, the intelligent man is one who has successfully fulfilled many accomplishments and is yet willing to learn more. Napoleon Hill, action is the real measure of intelligence. Robert Antoine Wilson, belief is the death of intelligence. I think I missed some quotes here. Paul Cezanne says, genius is the ability to renew one's emotions in daily experience. Daniel Goleman says, the emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than the thinking brain. Samuel Goldwyn says, give me a smart idiot over a stupid genius any day. And this quote is from, it's like unknown, the author is unknown, but it says the difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits. Alan Moore says, don't leave home without your sword, your intellect. George Bernard Shaw, it is the mark of a truly intelligent person to be moved by statistics. Catherine Deneuve says, a woman has to be intelligent, have charm, a sense of humor, and be kind. It's the same qualities I require from a man. Okay. Arthur Conan Doyle. My mind rebels at stagnation. Give me problems, give me work, give me the most abstruse cryptogram or the most intricate analysis, and I am in my own proper atmosphere, but I abhor the dull routine of existence. I crave for mental exhalation. Not exhalation, exhalation. So you see, guys, all these people, they have wondered about how the human being will step into the future and how far can we see beyond our limits. And really, everybody's like you can say your past is there to tell you what your limits are. Your future is there to break them, to go beyond them. Because if we don't surpass our limits, then there wasn't an energy in the moment that cared to see more. I am telling you, it's like it's too easy to make life a photograph and then end the search. And I would say, let's say you're an emotional person listening to this talk and you're like, Mr.Within, it's like, what about emotions? What about my emotions? I would say, even if you're an emotional person, everything changes and the observance of the shift leads to intelligence. Think of it this way, that all intelligence is going back to the question, what is happening now. And the emergence of the concept of time is for that resolve. It's aimed towards being assistance. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the quote tunnel. I will keep this on for a few minutes if people have questions. So I'll open it up to Q&A. And I wanted to say, if there are people who water their plants, please consider watering the membership of this channel. I mean, you know, I'm gonna read. I got a Rumi poetry book here, and I'm gonna raise the brightness of my laptop and choose a page to read while people think of questions if they have any. This poem by the Sufi mystic poet Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi is titled "The Illness of Ego." He says, if you don't want your friend of today to be unfriendly tomorrow, choose friendship with the wise. You're seasick from the storms of the ego because you make everything stormy. If you take a jewel in hand, it loses its luster. Near you, kindness of heart becomes hatred, and even a beautiful word becomes vulgar. Okay, so that's one sentence. He says, if you take a jewel in hand, it loses its luster. Near you, kindness of heart becomes hatred, and even a beautiful word becomes vulgar. You say, I've heard this all before. Tell me something else, my friend. If something fresh and bright is shared, the very next day you're cranky and bored. Get rid of this illness. When it's gone, every old tale becomes new and makes the wayside ditch burst into blossom. The balance between heaven and earth, ladies and gentlemen. The relationship of the sky and the ground. In front of our eyes, we're grounded in form. Behind our eyes, we're the sky that this form pilots in. Guys, there's so many questions in the chat section, I don't know which one to answer. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful, and as long as there's a new day, and as long as the eyes perceive anew, words cannot be our owner. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings and namaste. And care for the unknown. It is our birthright. Regardless of how we know ourselves, how we know others, and how we know the world, there's unknown dimensions to the self, unknown dimensions to others, and unknown dimensions to the world. And who else can explore this? We must become the pilot of our eyes, and in some sense invent a future that we all are honored by. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.